Transition to the next point. So Thatcher, her relevance to Latin America was not simply this question of fighting Argentina, right? I mean, she was also very close, and I believe she even said a whole variety of nice things on the death of Augusto Pinochet, right?
Yes.
I mean, is there sort of taking it out of just the Argentine context? Is there any complication at all to memory of Maggie Thatcher in Latin America, or is she understood sort of just as, this supporter of horrific military regimes? And understanding the Pinochet regime is itself sort of a historically complicated memory in Chile and other places, but...
Right. Yeah, I mean, she is pretty closely tied to Chile, especially, I mean, that she's one of the first countries to start selling arms to Chile again in 1980, that England and Pinochet get arms deals set up, because under Carter, certainly he'd sort of marginalized that effort because of human rights allegations and things like the Church Commission and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And in return, I mean, Chile and Argentina have nearly gone to war with one another at this point over some islands in the, in the Beagle Channel for questions. Basically, I mean, they're really cold rocks. I suppose it's for maritime boundaries,
right.
But
right.
In that process that's part of the reason why Argentina is also kind of hoping to get the Falklands, is it sort of gets them away from the Beagle War and these conflicts with Chile that nearly lead to warfare. And so when that happens, then you get this really strange geopolitical alignment in Latin America, because you have all these theoretically right-wing authoritarian governments in places like Brazil, Chile, Argentina, still Paraguay, Uruguay. And what you end up with Chile and England sort of working together, that Chile supports England in the Malvinas War and not Argentina. And Argentina shut out from both England and the United States and is trying to say, oh, look, we're a big first world player, and it's rejected by these two countries, so it ends up having to turn to the Soviet Union for weapons and Cuba. So that, the sort of groups that had forsworn, that it wasn't a part of it, turns to for weaponry, but it's also these groups that are supposed to represent the left. We'll have this right-wing dictatorship, right. And even Brazil gets drawn into the fray because the Soviet weapons end up passing through Brazil, which is still under a right-wing dictatorship for a few more years, a democratizing one at that moment, that it's already starting to open up. But so you get this really strange regional geopolitical alignment in which Chile is sort of the outlier, aligning itself with the First World, and specifically with the so-called First World, right? I mean, that historians at this point, we hate those terms.
Right.
But that they're allied with England, while Brazil and Argentina are sort of working together informally. So it is a sort of dramatic. So she is, like when she died yesterday, Pinochet's family says, oh, we've lost a very dear friend, that she certainly approved of the neoliberal policies of Pinochet. And I think she was more, I mean, this is pure conjecture, but I think that the Pinochet regime is more personalist than almost every other one in South America, perhaps save for the Stroessner regime in Paraguay. Mm-hmm. I think there's, that allowed for a kind of strength of action and unilateral decision-making that Thatcher really liked and employed herself.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, and, to abstract away again from this, it is very strange for me to sort of look back at some retrospective, and this sort of is in, I think, mainly in the United Kingdom, right? But you have this, leftists were never besotted with Thatcher, right? I mean, they knew Thatcher was the enemy from the start, right, in the United Kingdom, and I think in the United States, and so there was, it was not difficult to convince them that Thatcher was problematic. But it is interesting to me how the Falklands War becomes tied into this version of anti-colonialist rhetoric, such that sort of being on the anti-colonial, anti-imperial side, in this case, meant siding with a vicious, authoritarian, brutal, right-wing military regime from a settler society.
Yeah.
Because on the other side was Maggie Thatcher.
Yeah.
Which is historically, fascinating. It's politically fascinating to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It sort of destroys all these stereotypes.
What's that?
It destroys all these Cold War stereotypes. The left was with the left, the right was with the right, and that's that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, for a while, and I think that this is changing, but for a while, sort of, expressing contempt for the decision to go to war in the Falklands was sort of a sort of almost a leftist rite of passage in the United Kingdom, and I think that is changing, right? And I also think that any regime in the United Kingdom would have done the same thing. I don't think you needed Maggie to decide to go to war, right? I mean, maybe you needed her to decide to go to war in this particular fashion, but that a Labour regime, a Labour government would have gone to war as well.